Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Osquery Office Hours. It's just about Thanksgiving, so whatever folks do to celebrate, have a good time. Maybe it's only U.S. people, but whatever. At least here in Boston, it's cold today. Hope the weather is good elsewhere. Anyhow, welcome to OS Query. Announcements and highlights since the last meeting. I don't think I have anything. I'll pause a moment and see if anyone else has an announcement or anything. Okay. Next section is sort of an open section designed for any questions, issues, PRs, anything people want to bring up that they didn't feel comfortable adding to the agenda directly. Okay. Stefano, I think you added some stuff, so take it away.
Yeah, so the very first argument, process arguments and escaping and quoting. So related to this, I am working on augmenting the ES process events table so that it will now get the parent command line, the parent path, and the parent command line count. While also additionally augmenting other events that did not have the command line of the process. So, for instance, the fork event for the process events did not have a command line. But so, what about the arguments? To implement this table, or well, to add these two columns, what we need to do is to create a cache of the process that have been seen until then, and this has to be initialized through a snapshot done from the list of current processes. The logic that I'm using to do so, I borrowed it from the processes table. And I noticed that the processes table basically does not quote or escape the arguments. A bit of a roundabout way of saying that I'm trying to currently reuse that code to initialize this snapshot. And I also wanted to bring it out of the processes table, make it common to the ES process events table, which instead does quote the process arguments, thanks to the recent 8054 PR. Now, from there, I went and looked at what was the state on the other platform OS and tables, and I noticed that the result is a bit mixed. Again, on Linux, the processes table does not do any quoting. The audit table does not do any quoting, but the BPF table does, although it does with single quotes and has some issues in some specific cases. So the fundamental question is, can we normalize this? And then the last thing is that I think that we should be presenting these arguments either quoted so that again, multiple arguments may be separated by space, can be differentiated by many separate arguments. But the question is also then how to do it, if we want to do it in the ES process events way, or as I think Youssef mentioned or suggested, of having an additional column with a JSON, a small JSON document to list the arguments. The very last comment I can say between the two, the direct quoting. So what are the pros and the cons of the two methods? The ones at least I see. So the pros for the direct quoting from the command line is that I think it's slightly like faster, even only because you're only like you're changing the existing column, and you're not adding additional data that has to be processed, or in general, an additional column. Partially the downside is that it is sort of a breaking change if one was intelligently parsing in the backend, but at the same time is actually fixing something, because the backend could not, there's no way that the backend could properly separate arguments. And again, it's this method is faster. The other thing is the JSON way. And again, the JSON way is slightly slower, but then everything stays the same. Like the original column stays like it is right now. But
Stefano, I have a couple of questions.
Stop. Sorry.
Yeah. I agree this is sort of an annoying, confusing mess, and we're inconsistent. So I agree. Are you aiming to fix this to allow sort of better internal joins and where clauses, especially between like process events and other stuff? Or are you fixing it to allow like better data collection, in third parties that are looking at the results of this, or just kind of to make the display output a little simpler to handle?
So, well, at the very start, since I wanted to reuse the code of the processes table or extract that code and make it a library, a common library, the first problem I have is that when I do snapshot what is saved in the cache, the command lines that are saved in the cache are different from the ones that comes through the events. So I need to normalize that in some way. But then looking more into it, yeah, I noticed that the data presented by Osquery as is, it's not, I would dare to say it's not correct, in the sense that, again, you cannot properly understand if there is an argument, multiple arguments or not. So I think normalizing also improves the data itself, and the ability to understand what one is seeing. I think the question is, so I don't know exactly what were the issue in the past. I don't know if Alessandro knows something more. I mean, I know that, again, it seems that in the past people wanted to have the output to be more similar to like PS, the PS process, which it does not escape or quote these arguments, but then makes it difficult again to understand where is the limit. But I mean, this is not a clear answer for me. Like, why exactly beyond that?
I feel like Osquery, I don't know about this specific history, but I feel like a lot of software tends to blur the distinction between human readable output and parsable output. And I feel like we have that problem all over the place.
But
so,
yeah,
I'd kind of be, personally, I'm okay with whatever we do. Like if we think we should just improve the quoting like we did in 8054, okay. If we want to add, a much more clear structured column of like, well, you just want like real JSON output, here, have real JSON output or something. It might get a little bit weird. We might have to think a little bit around like what happens if you run Osquery in JSON mode. So I don't know if we actually want like JSON data or just like an array. I don't know if SQLite supports arrays. So whatever we do, we should think about it also in the context of how a JSON column would be transformed going through the JSON loggers and through like the JSON command line flags.
Yeah. So I was reading what Charvel. I see.
Sorry, my internet's a little
Yeah.
off today, so just typing it in the messages.
So though I'm not fully understanding where that parent process tree is being presented exactly, like in which column.
Oh, I thought you're also adding like a parent command line.
Oh,
column.
yeah. So definitely, but then like the idea right now. So for the table right now, the idea is to add a new command line, parent command line column, which shows the command line for the parent process. And though again, in that case, I'm not sure where the tree should be shown.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean like we would build out the tree, but if we have the data, someone else can build out the tree. So in that case, having JSON as a structured way is probably a better way to go.
I see what you mean. Yeah. Yeah. Going back on the human readable versus parsable, I would say that right now is neither, because again, the human readable to me means that reading it, the human understands more easily what happened. But again, given that you lose the separation between arguments, the human anyway too cannot retrieve what happened there. So what has been shown is still incorrect. The human would assume that since there is a space between the characters, that those are two arguments, while maybe it was a single one.
To me, that's pretty compelling that we need to get towards the solution that would allow someone to actually tell that, regardless of whether that's more like quote readable.
Well, I would say that's exactly a human readable format, right? That's what PS does as well. And I wouldn't say we shouldn't fix it, because I agree it's unparsable. And it creates ambiguity. So I think we should figure out what the right solution is to that ambiguity is.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can then shoot. I can try to shoot a blueprint. Although, I mean, yeah, if we go with JSON, that means also reverting the change done in the yes process events. But I mean, it's a change either way, either in the yes process events or in all the other tables. So, yeah.
Do you have a preference here?
I don't think my preference makes sense. Like, I would want to know who uses that data, because I don't. While I can imagine, I don't imagine things. I don't use that data, and right now I don't know what issues they may find with either method. Again, what I can say is that maybe the JSON one is slightly slower, because yeah, like writing JSON is slightly slower, and then you also have to add a new column.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. That's it.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern with JSON is like do we end up double encoding the JSON?
I mean, we would in like JSON logged results, but that's not the only place where we do that, right? Like there are other tables that do return JSON, and that JSON would get double encoded as well.
Maybe. I think it's pretty rare though, but I guess that's okay. I mean, maybe one of the interesting things about JSON is it kind of lets the person writing the query manipulate it, right? You could certainly extract the array and quote it there. It's kind of cumbersome, but you could do it.
I mean, I don't know how much it adds to this, but I can say that in the past, when we were working for a customer for those LXD container table, one of the issues there was, in fact, that the spec had one of the field in the spec was not fully specified. It was very variable, and for them it was okay to output JSON and then pass it. But yeah, so it has been a past discussion. But yeah,
I think I don't know that I have to be a dictator or anything, but like I'd accept almost anything here. Like if you want to just add quotes the same way they got added to 8054, I think that's cool. I think if you want to make a JSON column with raw data, that's probably cool too. Maybe hide it so it doesn't return it by default if you add a giant JSON column, but whatever. If you want to do both, okay. I think kind of anything seems reasonable, and I think there's value in normalizing it. And I don't think I have an opinion about what correct is.
I think maybe
I feel similar as well. I think that you doing something that makes sense to you is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I'll double check it. I'll think. Yeah, I'll try with JSON. Try to think with the JSON way, just because there's less table to change, so there's less change for the end user basically. Like we can revert the yes process event table change for BPF. Well, question mark, because it's like that since I think it has been added. But then, yeah, for the rest of the tables, they would stay the same and then have an additional column.
If you added a JSON column, are you thinking it would be a JSON column that was just the process args, or would you like make a raw data JSON column that had kind of whatever we added to it?
Well, the objective now was to target only the fragment that was variable. I haven't thought about the pros and cons of making it all raw. I mean, it's the weight of double processing maybe the data. So it will be, I don't know, at that point it will be either you get the table form or you get the JSON with the array form. So,
well, I'm sort of pondering, if I think about adding a JSON column that was just the process args, it actually feels a little bit awkward, because if I want to fish some data out, I have to fish some out of JSON and some out of the columns. So that makes me start thinking about, well, what if we just returned a JSON column that had basically all the raw JSON data in it? And then, maybe we don't populate it with everything, but then it just becomes very easy to add things into kind of a raw JSON column as we decide we need them. So you have like column format or JSON format.
I was also thinking, like, in a sense, this almost seems like a display only issue, which means that I'm questioning if when one is selecting the table through Osquery eyes, so from the shell, and has to present it in table form, then there you can use, I mean, you can still add an additional, either add an additional column or show it with the quotes, etc. But then when you are sending the data, you don't do the double encoding thing, but you do use a JSON array like you store
Mhm.
the question is if you maybe it's what you were mentioning at the beginning. So you store the fact that that is really an array, and you actually encode it directly as an array instead of as a string, which is represent a JSON document that has an
Yeah.
array in it.
If SQLite supported arrays, it would be easy, right? You could do this in Postgres pretty naturally. You just make an array type.
Yeah.
But SQLite doesn't have arrays, so it feels harder because, like, I agree, it's sort of like when you're looking at table data, it's just a display cast effectively, right? So,
Yeah.
I don't have a good suggestion.
No, but no, it was useful. I haven't thought about the splitting the display and the and the data representation itself. So I'll try to see if
It may be really hard. I couldn't say.
yeah. It was useful.
I'm just taking some notes on that. Okay. Anyhow, it sounds like you kind of just want to go chew on it, write some code, and do something reasonable.
Yeah, I want to try to explore that display and data separation. If the even only know what are the limits so that I can know them, document them, etc. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Limiting TLS bandwidth usage.
Yeah. So this is not something I am working on. This comes from the question from a user on Slack. Basically, they found themselves with their own logger backend not working, or more specifically returning HTTP 500, and they saw Osquery bandwidth usage toward that endpoint increase by quite a lot compared also to the normal situation. So what happens there is that so they for instance normally have a 20 to 30 megabit megabit bandwidth usage, but in that situation they had up to 1.5 and always increasing amount gigabyte of bandwidth usage. I checked, and so the issue I see is that we have three flags to control the amount of data to be sent via the logger. One is the period, one is the amount of lines, the other is the line size. Now, the core of the issue, there are two things. So first of all, when a backend does not respond, Osquery buffers the logs so that it can then send them later. And this sort of, let's say, create the first problem, which is that either if you don't change the default, or if you if you don't change the default because you see that normally the bandwidth is pretty low and the default is 1024 lines, when everything backlogs, maybe the amount of lines you're sending is much more suddenly, because maybe you were only sending really 10 lines of results every time because you were able to do that periodically. Well, instead, if suddenly you have a big backlog, it jumps, the amount jumps up. So the first thing is that, sure, you reduce the amount, so you tune and reduce it so that the amount of lines is more in line with what you want in the end. The problem is that it's difficult to correlate the amount of lines with the end bandwidth usage, because so for results, the differential, the concept of line is a row that is either added or removed, while for a snapshot, the line is the whole result from the query. So there is a disparity, a huge disparity between those two sizes. And if one configures only the amount of lines, it might be okay for the differential, but it might not be okay for the snapshot case or a mixed case. So the question from there is, I don't know, does it make more sense maybe to have a more generic bandwidth usage flag that can sort of automatically choose how much to send, basically? So doesn't change it at all the order of the lines, but it tries to stay inside an average bandwidth usage. So it might still go above or below, because again, if you encounter a big line, a big snapshot result that make you go above the average or below the average, you do. But then at the next time, it tries to send less, etc.
Is the issue specifically around HTTP request sizes? Because when you say bandwidth, I'm thinking about throughput, and I'm thinking like, unless we're dropping logs, like the total throughput is going to be the same either way.
No, because I'm saying bandwidth usage because so if you have a query or events, let's say that return results, and they are all differential, that return results 10 lines every 10 seconds, and you have the period of the TLS logger, which is 10 seconds, then every send of the logger sends 10 lines. And this happens over a period, well, it's discrete, but over a period of 10 seconds. While if you stop sending those logs because you're unable to, and your maximum amount of lines you can send per period is 1024, the next time you will not send 10 lines, but suddenly you will send 1024 lines, and maybe continuously like so 1024 lines for after 10 seconds, then after 10 seconds another 1024 lines, until you have emptied the backlog you created by not being able to send those lines. So eventually it resolves itself, but the problem is that it creates these huge spikes of bandwidth usage that if you try to limit, maybe you are limiting it then too much for the normal case.
And so then it can like never catch up, basically, is the concern?
It might not ever catch up, but also the composition of your data. So the lines, since the concept of line is not fixed and the size can change quite a lot, and the limiting is again around the amount of lines, then at every period the amount of data you send varies quite a lot, and it's difficult then to tune that amount of lines so that it works for the normal case and for the problematic case when you have a backlog.
I'm actually not sure if we have a problem. So I'm still way back there. Because I agree that there is a lot of variability in the amount of data that Osquery can output, and that's influenced by the queries all have different sizes and differentials and snapshots, and if you've backed up data, and if you've chucked some live queries in, although those come in a different endpoint, or if you've changed the schedule. But I think people have generally been biased towards getting data as fast as possible and not buffering it. So you tend to see, it's like if Osquery is going to emit, 1,000 bytes of logs over the course of a day, you can have that in chunks or you can have that spaced out. And people usually seem to want stuff emitted as soon as possible, which means that there's always this variability. So I don't quite know how simplifying or changing it to sort of have like a target bandwidth utilization helps or solves either variability or the problem where, I don't see it helps with variability. And it sounds like this is also somewhat prompted by something that I don't think is an Osquery bug, but sort of a general like distributed network kind of bug where if you have a bandwidth, if you've constricted bandwidth and you're trying to send something bigger than that, you can get yourself in a situation where it tries, fails, logs that, tries, fails, logs that. So your logs balloon out as you keep trying to send. So basically, you get a cascade failure.
It would not fail. So first of all, it will not create. So the idea is not to create a log that has to be sent again, but it would also not fail sending. The idea is that the budget, basically the budget of lines changes depending on what those lines are, because currently that does not happen. So again, on a period you might be sending 100 bytes, the other period you might be sending slightly less of a megabyte.
Well, what's the goal?
Is
the goal just to make configuration more consistent and easier to understand?
I think the problem is in what's the end result in practice. Like if you have, I think again the understanding. It's not possible to understand what are exactly the reasonable minimum and maximum of data or bandwidth usage that you can receive. I mean, one of the issues that I can see is that if you receive too much data, suddenly the backend also can have issue processing it. Like if you have 1,000, if you normally expect that 1,000, well, or even more Osquery agents send you only, again, in total 20 megabit per second, and then suddenly it shoots up 100 times. That seems, well, unexpected and potentially disruptive. And again, it's difficult to calculate the maximum because, well, okay, there's also the third line, which is the line size, which actually does something that, yeah, I mean, it makes you lose data because when a single line is longer than a megabyte, then it won't be sent at all. It will be totally lost. But then again, that limit is only, it might be small or it might be actually huge, but it's huge only in context of the differential, but maybe not on the snapshot. So
let's say we have a new log bandwidth specification, and let's say it uses something kind of like you just sketched out, right? So you have basically a budget per time period. When you send a message, when you send a batch of logs, you take it out of your budget. At some point, your bucket runs out, it refills in the next 10 seconds. I don't know, whatever, something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's probably harder to code. We probably have more code complexity. And how will people actually set that? Will they actually set a budget, or will they basically just crank the knob all the way up so they don't buffer and get logs immediately?
I mean, I would expect that it's easier to know, and so I'm asking here now because at a certain point, like again, I don't know. Obviously, I don't know what's easier, but I suspected that it was easier to say, okay, I know that the pipeline, well, the network, sorry, from our Osquery agents to the backend can support up to these, and we don't want to use it more than these. And you can set that limit. Obviously, from the Osquery side, you say that please still test it. Like, do not set it at a value that is exactly or very near the normal use case, because then you can backlog your agents. So I would still expect that they would put it maybe 2 times the normal bandwidth usage, or even more if they have the availability. But then it's a limit that they know that stays like that. It doesn't get near crazy values that they do not want to have.
I mean, if you or someone is excited to do the work to simplify the options, like, okay,
So,
but if I think about how I deploy Osquery and about how I've run systems like this in the past, there's not a whole lot of value. But I can't speak to the person you've talked to, or to the deployments you see, or Zach's deployments, or I can only say that in my experience, what I usually want is I want as much as I can. I just want to ingest that all server side and buffer it. So, like, when if I think about Collide's Osquery deployment, or if I think about similar places in the past, as much as I can, I want to pull that data into my pipeline on the server as soon as I can. So anything that buffers it in the client is already a little bit of not what I want, right? So I'm like, and then on the server side, like, I think it's a data pipeline, right? You have an ingest point, and then you have processing, right? And processing is usually more constrained, and I have to be able to ingest enough and buffer it internally. So to me personally, I'm like, okay, but no, it wouldn't make much of a difference to how I use Osquery. But maybe to this customer or to Zach.
Yeah, I mean, I take a slightly different stance from you. I think it is useful that Osquery buffers things to some extent, and yet I've never run into issues like Stefano is describing. I could definitely understand how the configuration is limited and could lead to such issues, but I haven't personally run into them. So again, also, I guess I have a similar thought. I end up at a similar conclusion as Yusuf, which is like, Stefano, if you have a customer who wants it and you want to prioritize doing it, like, not opposed to it.
No, so no, this wasn't the case. To be fair, I mean, I thought it was interesting and valuable to discuss, and maybe also document what were the ideas. But yeah, I don't have any interest, let's say, right now on implementing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll agree, Zach, that Osquery buffers is great when there's outages, someone's offline. But I want my ingest point to be able to handle as much bandwidth as people throw at it. And then I want to buffer to the extent I can, right? I want to ingest it and buffer it on my side. So constraining the clients that are out there would ultimately be a net lose, right? I'm also a SaaS. So some IT shop can spin up another 10,000 clients, which is going to be more of a hit to me than, one machine sending like a 10x spike. So again, a very different world than if I was like one shop and, had some complicated tuning parameters. So I don't know. I feel like this is kind of really targeting around the idea where you have a deployment with a very clear known number of hosts, and you very carefully budgeted for, okay, my server is on a gigabit connection, and I know that can handle 1,000 hosts as long as they don't exceed their budgets. So it feels very complicated for, I don't know what the gain is. But
okay, yeah,
I definitely agree that it's confusing and hard to predict what'll happen. I'll take some more notes in 4 minutes in a few minutes. That's kind of the end of our agenda. I don't know if people have other stuff they'd like to talk about.
Not an agenda item per se, but I think, Seth, you might also have an interest in this. It's regarding the keychain tables. Someone had like attempted an implementation by copying keychains, and yeah, I think both Stefano and I suggested that copying was a bad way to kind of go about it, and caching it was a better way. So I haven't just gotten around to reviewing it, but I will in the next few days.
Mm-hmm. The copy approach was something that came out of office hours or a ticket where we were all discussing prior. So I think they got that idea from us.
Yeah. It didn't work on the ACLs, the keychain access control list table, and it also felt like there were cases where we wouldn't clean up if things went wrong, and just personally, like having keychain
I agree.
data lying around in temp directories is not the greatest way, or like at least I wouldn't want it on my systems. So
I don't disagree. I just wanted to defend them because I think they got that idea from us. So you said they put up another PR that tried rate limiting and caching?
yeah,
That's pretty cool.
I don't have the link handy.
I'll fish it up. I'll look it up. This one feels very hard to me. My recollection, or just to recap, so one of the big Osquery users found this, and Apple kind of told them that because we're using unsupported APIs, that okay. So what one of the customers found is that when they somehow related to Osquery usage, they see keychains get corrupted. And I think this is all in a ticket somewhere. And it seems pretty correlated with Osquery usage of the certificates, usage of the keychain table. Whether it's just Osquery or whether it also has to get coupled with login and logout events, I don't remember. They spoke to Apple about it, and Apple kind of just said, those APIs are all deprecated. We don't care if they corrupt data. Go use the new APIs, which is a frustrating stance for Apple to take.
Well, and it's frustrating because the new APIs don't provide the same data.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And I've got a similar response from Apple as well.
There's some key pieces of data that people seem to need that are not satisfied.
Much more than pieces. So what? There's this shift inside Apple and the keychains. So the old APIs are based around files, right? They're like this keychain, this file, give me its data, right? And they're very file driven. The new APIs don't. There's nothing like that. They're just give me all of the secrets associated with my runtime environment, right? It's this very, very runtime secret segmentation, right? It's very iOS-y in a way. And just experimenting with it, I didn't go through all of enterprise security, so maybe there's an enterprise security flag. But like if you take the certificates table today, you get a bunch of data, and if you use the APIs they suggest you use, you get like a 10th, and it's just the certificates aren't tagged.
Okay, so it's not only that for each certificate it returns less data, it's also that it doesn't even return all the certificates.
I bet we get all the data, maybe, but
no. There's key columns that are missing.
Oh, I didn't know that. Even better.
I can't remember what those are off the top of my head, but they, from discussions that I've had, I understand that they are very important to know for people.
So on one of those GitHub issues, there was a specific error code, and I kind of traced it, and thankfully security.framework is open sourced on Apple. And if you kind of search through the code, you kind of figure out the conditions that kind of trigger the database corruption. And along with the race condition of opening it, in close succession, it also tries to upgrade the keychain. And on that upgrade, it fails and it corrupts. So I think there's like two things that kind of triggers it. I've seen it once, and that's when my VM kind of upgrades, but haven't seen it since. I can fish that error out. So if you,
I would love to see that, Charvel. I would also love to know if anyone has found any way to reliably reproduce this, because my understanding is that some folks have seen this very consistently within their environments, and I know we at Fleet have never seen it in our environment. Though I'm not sure if it's clear to everyone, but the PR that Stefano linked, 8192, is from Victor on our team at Fleet. Because my other understanding of this issue is that our customers hadn't been seeing it at Fleet for a while. It wasn't a top priority for us. Now we have multiple customers seeing it. Now it is a priority for us.
I guess our customer was a canary.
do you know if the upgrade from Ventura to Sonoma has triggered this? Can you?
I think that Steph's
The original bug
Steph's
report.
customer has been experiencing it for a long time.
The original bug report is tied to 12.6.
Okay.
So I don't know what I don't remember which Mac version 12 was. Yeah, so they say they had if I'm trying to remember their details in this ticket, they said they have a fleet of thousands of Macs. And my memory is they were even making relatively heavy use of the certificates table. And they said they saw about 0.3% corruption in a week. So that was pretty consistent. Yeah.
So it's not clear that this PR will resolve it entirely, because it's not clear to me, at least, that it's actually accesses in rapid succession that cause the issue. I have some suspicion that it might just be that every access has some small percentage chance of causing the issue. And so regardless of whether it should, I would think that this PR should help on either of those cases. In one case, if it's the rapid succession truly, then maybe it should eliminate the issue entirely. And if it's just every access has some probability, then it should reduce it substantially, but not eliminate it entirely.
My guess is I think it's about concurrent readers and writers and things. Because like deep enough down, this is SQLite, and it's storing something. Some of the columns are stored with like an application layer encryption. Is my memory of this of what's like happening way down in the guts of it, and I bet something just didn't thread safe.
Yes, and my guess would be that on the systems that are exhibiting this issue, there's people like using web browsers or something that are accessing the keychain, and that's at the same time as Osquery.
Logout events. It's just probably a big mess, and I might even say that things like web browsers or the system things may actually have some better API on top of it that's throttling or acting as has a mutex on it somewhere. So we may basically just be hanging out at a layer that isn't any good. So I don't know.
So what do folks think of this PR?
I think Charvel led by saying that he just hadn't reviewed it yet.
Okay, I have like a half-done review that I'll be dropping onto it. See if I can wrap it up today.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it at all, but I am, excited from afar. Yeah, I keep, man, I'm really worried that at some point Apple's going to kill this API and we won't have access to the data at all.
Yes, and it's parallels risks, I think, that we've expected from Apple all along, where they'll kill access to all sorts of APIs that people find important for security.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe we'll get an endpoint security entitlement if they ever do or something.
If they made a new API that supported it, it would be fantastic. If it supported the use case that people actually need to achieve.
There are already profile add remove events now in ES, so maybe certificate add remove modify should follow, maybe? I don't know.
That people, my understanding is it's not the events that people need, it's the current state.
Yeah.
There's a lot of let me make sure that my MDM has the right certificates, or let me make sure that this thing's installed the way I want. See a lot of that.
That's my understanding as well.
Well, thank you, Fleet, for putting up a PR.
One of the additional related things is that eventually I should, so I can mention this, I should be creating an integration between the keychain and Osquery for TLS.
Nice.
For our TLS, because currently we use OpenSSL, which expects files on the file system, but the interest is to use the keychain directly. I hope they won't remove, I can see two ways. Either they, you have to use their TLS, HTTP TLS connection APIs, so completely cutting out HTTP, BoostBeast, the library we are currently using, which would mean re-implementing a lot of things, which is annoying. Or the other thing is instead creating what OpenSSL currently calls as a provider, where you access the keychain certificates and use the system APIs to sign what the TLS handshake requires, etc. for MTLS. I'm doing actually something similar on Windows, where I am using the Windows CNG libraries to exactly to create a provider that OpenSSL then can use to sign in the TLS handshake using certificates that are in the Windows store.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Pretty cool. I always wonder about that. I mean, Zach, maybe you remember the history. I always wonder why Osquery uses sort of a shared node key and then sort of, no authentication on the logging stream, as not like MTLS on the log streams or something.
Osquery does support MTLS.
Does it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. I guess it does. I just forget we don't use it at Collide.
And there is authentication on the log stream. It's authenticated by the node key.
Yeah, but I mean, why the shared secret? Why shared secret and not more focus on MTLS? And maybe that's just an artifact of how Collide deployed Osquery. Because you're right, it does support it under the hood. So
yeah, it totally does. And remember that the shared secret is just used for the initial enrollment, and then the node key is negotiated, which is a per instance secret.
Yeah, it's still a shared key. It's a shared secret distributed by the TLS server, but it's a shared secret.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be.
MTLS is there. and it
Sure.
works.
Why don't I
And,
use it? I don't know.
I know people use it. Fleet, for example, doesn't support it natively, but we've advised people to set up proxies that do MTLS auth in front of it.
Okay. Thanks. Neat hearing that you're looking at that, Stefano. I know people who would be interested in having Osquery use the MDM distributed certs, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely agreed on that.
People want to talk about other stuff? Otherwise, it's been about an hour.
I would just like to say I'd love to see us get an Osquery release out by the end of the year. Cutting
Great
some
suggestion.
time, cutting some time in like mid-December and releasing by the end of the year would be cool.
What do we need to do to get a release out?
I mean, there's some PRs that are not yet merged that I would like to see get merged.
Hello, Victor. You're muted.
Hey guys.
Hi
Hey,
there.
Victor,
Welcome.
you've just missed by a few minutes the part where we were discussing your PR.
Okay, yeah, I saw there was office hours, and then I was confused whether it was on an hour ahead or an hour behind. Okay.
But I think that generally it sounded like I'm partway through a review. Other folks hadn't yet had a chance to review it, but it sounds like there's enthusiasm for anything that could help improve the issue.
Okay. Any concerns that were brought up?
I don't think there were any concerns brought up. We actually mostly just discussed more of the background of what we think is causing the issue, and
Okay.
but I don't think there were any concerns with the approach.
I mean, one question I had, if can someone have like gigabytes of keychain data, and if we try to cache it, it blows up?
Probably.
Theoretically.
Seems theoretically possible. I mean, I would suspect that the macOS like keychain, like macOS itself would blow up if people had gigabytes of data, but definitely don't know.
I mean, in theory, you can put documents and images into your keychain now, so possibly.
Okay.
Okay.
This is interesting. I mean, I was going to say,
does Osquery return that? Because I'm only caching whatever
No.
Osquery returns.
I mean, we have a read limit that we may use there too as a way to say we are not reading the we are not caching the keychain if it's bigger than, but then yes, you obviously go back to the previous issue of potentially accessing too many times the keychain. But yeah, that image thing is annoying.
But I don't think that Osquery would be returning that. Like, we don't return the full contents of the keychain item. So if the concern is just about like blowing up the in-memory cache, then the fact that people can put binary data into the keychain or any other kind of data doesn't worry me too much.
What's the max size on a cert subject?
Yeah, I guess if there was a gigabyte of rows, Osquery wouldn't be able to return that anyway, right?
I mean, it might actually. It depends on what's the limit set, the memory limit set. So I would say that's less of an issue.
Okay.
Zach, I think a release by the end of the year is probably a great idea. We should maybe take a look at which PRs we want to get in, and well, maybe I'll shuffle some milestones around, and like feel free to chuck anything in a milestone or something. Figure it out. I
Sounds
think
good.
I'd love to.
I think this PR in particular is on my mind, but
this one's great. I'd love to get the collate sort in too. As another one.
Oh
So,
yeah, the version sorting. Yeah.
So there's stuff. And yeah, you said you had to go, but I'll try and shuffle milestones around. Yeah. Victor, thank you for the PRs.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if people want to keep talking about Victor's PR. If anyone's got anything else. If not, we can end this meeting. Okay. Thank you all. Code, reviews, time, your ongoing presence in our project.
Have a good week, guys.
All right, bye.
Bye.